All right, History 127. Hello, how are you? Let's have a great semester. We can do this, we can do it well. And let's get started. Your first essay question is, explain the forces that drove Europeans to exploration. Let me give you some background first, because we start this course, Growth of American Civilization 1, at the beginning of the history of the Western Hemisphere. There are two hemispheres in the world, the Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere. And the ancient world didn't even know that the Western Hemisphere existed. Humans sprang up and became human, evolved into humans in places like Africa and China. And way back, probably about 50,000 years ago, humans began to walk across a land bridge from Asia into North America, what is today Alaska, and down into the Western Hemisphere. And some of those people stopped and created permanent settlements and settled in tribes, created tribes, small tribes, Stone Age tribes. But others kept going south and started great civilizations. It's notable to know the Aztecs, in what is today Mexico, the Mayas in what is today Central America and Southern Mexico, and the Incas in South America, which is now Peru, mostly. Those were great advanced civilizations, and they existed before the Europeans ever got to the Western Hemisphere. The Aztecs, the Incas, and the Mayas. Now, getting back to Europe, in the 1300s, Europe begins to emerge out of the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, when the light of learning went out, because Rome has, of course, collapsed, and Europe has gone quite far backward. Civilization goes down, the Dark Ages. But in the 1300s, they begin to pull out of this and enjoy a renaissance. The word renaissance means rebirth. And they start discovering the glories and the achievements of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Good for them. Now, an aspect of the Renaissance is the age of exploration. And a guy by the name of Marco Polo, who's in Italian. There's no country of Italy back then, but they are Italian people living in separate city-states, and they have the Italian language and the Italian culture. And Marco Polo walks east, overland to China, and comes back after 2 years. They thought he was dead, but he arrived back after 2 years. And what has he got with him? Gunpowder. Wow, is that going to change history? But equally as important, he's got silks, spices, and perfumes. And the Italian wealthy, who can afford these things, love silks, spices, and perfumes. You know why? Because they needed the silks, because the silks were much nicer to wear than the coarse wool their clothing was made out of at the time. And they wanted the perfumes because the water was bad back in the Middle Ages, and not even rich people bathed once or twice a year. They needed perfumes to cover up how badly they smelled. And spices. They could not preserve meat in those days. They salted it, but that didn't work very well. And spices were used to cover up the rancid smell of meat as they tried to get it down, as they tried to eat it. And the Italians would sell these perfumes and silks and spices to the wealthy, not only in Italy, but up in Western Europe, where new countries are evolving, England and France and Spain and Portugal, for example. And you can make a lot of money doing that. Marco Polo did this to get rich, and it worked. Now, meanwhile, the Western Hemisphere is the Western Hemisphere, and who's living there in this pre-Columbian culture? That's before Columbus arrives in the New World. Who's living there? The indigenous peoples are living there. But all that's about to change, because during the Renaissance, educated men, and they were a small minority in Western Europe, but the educated men began to realize that the Greeks and Romans were right. The earth is not flat. Yes, it looks flat. It looks like you can fall off. But the earth is not flat. It's round. It's round. They knew that. But somebody had to prove it. And Christopher Columbus is the guy who proves it. He's the one who has the guts to take off in 3 ships and sail west, right out into the Atlantic Ocean from Spain. And he wants to get east. He wants to get to China, where he can get silks and spices and perfumes, bring them back to Western Europe, sell them at a huge markup, and yes, get rich and cut out those Italian middlemen inspired by Marco Polo. That is what Columbus was trying to do. Now, here begins your essay. You don't have to write about the background, but here begins your essay. And there are 3 particular explorers who had success that inspired other explorers to follow in their wake. And the first one is Columbus. The first one you mention is Columbus. I'm grabbing a marker here. Check. Next to Columbus. Mention him. He, quote unquote, discovered America. Although, how full of yourself and quite frankly racist do you have to be to walk up to a native on an island in the Caribbean and say, I just discovered you? Oh, thank you. You just discovered me. I didn't know I existed. But the fact is, what Columbus really did is he discovered America, the Americas, North America, Central America, and South America, standing for the Western Hemisphere. He discovered America for the Europeans. Obviously, the indigenous peoples knew they were already there. But he discovered the Western Hemisphere, the Americas, for the Europeans. Christopher Columbus. After over 70 days at sea, he's lucky he discovered it because his men were about to throw him overboard to the sharks. But he landed at a small island named San Salvador in the Caribbean and is the first European to reach the Western Hemisphere. Side note, in the year 1000, approximately, the Vikings came down from Scandinavia and spent a miserable winter off the coast of Canada in what today is Newfoundland. And let me tell you, the Vikings were attacked by the natives, left, did not stay, but technically the Vikings were there for 1 year in approximately the year 1000. But the real credit for discovering America has always gone to Christopher Columbus. And he wanted to get rich. Christopher Columbus. So you mention him. Now, why do we live in the United States of America and not the United States of Columbus, if Columbus was first? And that's because Columbus never figured out that he wasn't in Asia. He didn't know there was a Western Hemisphere in the way. He thought he had gone across the Atlantic Ocean and landed in China. In fact, Columbus thought when he landed in the Caribbean that he was in the Indies Islands off the coast of China, and that's why he named the native peoples Indians. Okay, and Columbus returned to Spain, came back to the New World again, never figured out that he had discovered a new hemisphere. He was first, but he didn't know it was a new hemisphere. The guy who came to the New World and figured it out and publicized it, he wrote a book, Amerigo Vespucci. Amerigo Vespucci. Okay? That's where we get America, the word America from. North America, Central America, South America. And notice these guys are Italians because the Italians living in Italy, that boot-shaped peninsula that juts into the Mediterranean Sea, were great sailors. They were some of the best sailors in the world, and they hired themselves out to Spain. They were sailing for Spain, but they were Italian. Keep that in mind. Now, Ferdinand Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan really motivated explorers because his mission was the first one ever to circumnavigate the globe. Sail all the way around the globe. That's what circumnavigate means. I'm talking about proof that the earth is round. I doubt any of you are flat earthers, but he's the first one to sail all the way around the world, circumnavigate the globe, although he was killed by natives in the Philippines when he was trying to tell them to join Christianity and get rid of their religion, and somebody threw a spear in his chest, but his crew finished the mission. And Magellan is always known as the first to circumnavigate the globe. These three explorers, check, 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 you should mention in your essay. Now, really, what did the explorers want? To get rich. That was their overall motivation, to get rich. You want to understand history, follow the money trail. Get rich. So check that one off big time. Get rich. They also wanted to seek a northwest passage. Why? Because they wanted to sail through North America or South America or Central America, just sail through the Western Hemisphere and get to China and get those spices and perfumes and silks and make themselves rich. So every river, every bay, they sailed into it, and this has got to be it. But there is no, we now know, they didn't know. They spent 100 years looking for it. There is no Northwest Passage, but they were seeking a Northwest Passage to the Far East so they could get rich. They wanted to claim new lands, okay? They wanted to take the flag of Spain or Portugal or France and eventually even England and put it in some land and say, we claim this in the name of the king. Claim new lands and eventually get rich from that and impress the king who would give them money. Claim new lands and get rich. Convert the natives to Christianity. And some of the explorers wanted to do just that. They were serious Christians and they wanted to convert the natives to Christianity. Some of them wanted to exploit the natives and make money off of the indigenous people by, yes, enslaving them. Now, Christian missionaries are a mixed bag, and I say this often. History's not black and white, it's gray. And some Christian missionaries did really wonderful work spreading the word of God and trying to help the native peoples. And some of them were cruel and exploited the natives in order to get rich. History's not black and white, it's gray. But some were very motivated to convert the natives, the Native Americans, to Christianity. And this is a factor, and you've got to have it. Okay, so Northwest Passage, check. New lands, check. Convert Native Americans to Christianity, check. Satisfy curiosity and seek adventure. There's something in the human DNA that makes us want to go boldly where no one has gone before, as they say at the start of every Star Trek episode. And we want to go to places we've never been before. Imagine seeing a river for the first time, a mountain. Any human has never, nobody you know has ever seen this mountain, this river, this lake, this land. It's a drive. It's a drive within us. Of course, all land today on the earth has been, quote unquote, discovered by civilization. That's why we want to go smaller and smaller and smaller and find particles that we didn't know existed before, that are smaller than the ones we thought were the smallest. And we want to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the oceans. It seems to be part of the human DNA. And even though it's very expensive and we have lots of poor people in America, we want to go to the moon and we want to go to Mars and we want to go beyond. It was driving people. Satisfy curiosity and seek adventure. Very, very important. Now, another thing that's very important in driving these explorers is primogeniture. Primogeniture. Not even easy to say it. Primogeniture. And that is something that existed in Europe back in those days of the very late 1400s and 1500s and into the 1600s. Primogeniture. And that is a system by which when the father dies, all of his money, his title, his land, goes to the oldest son. When the father dies, the money, the title, the land, all goes to the oldest son. The second son gets nothing. The third son gets nothing. The fourth son gets nothing. The daughters get nothing. It all goes to the oldest son. So the oldest son becomes the duke or the earl or the marquis or the prince or whatever it is. Second, third sons, nothing. Don't feel bad for them. They could still live in the castle, the great estate, and be taken care of. But the first son basically got everything. And a lot of the explorers were second, third, and fourth sons. If you look at these explorers, a lot of them were second, third, and fourth sons who said, oh yeah, I'm going to go make my own name. I'm going to go make my own fortune. I'm going to show Big Brother that he's not the best. Watch me. And primogeniture motivated second, third, and fourth sons to go out and explore and risk their lives, because it was very dangerous, exploring the New World, the Western Hemisphere, the Americas. All right? Now, I'm going to be grading your essay, and I'll check to make sure you mention Christopher Columbus and Amerigo Vespucci and Ferdinand Magellan, and probably most importantly, follow the money trail. They wanted to get rich. They wanted to seek the Northwest Passage. They wanted to claim new lands. They wanted to convert the natives to Christianity. And they wanted to satisfy curiosity and seek adventure. And then end up this essay by telling me about primogeniture. And you will get a very good grade if you do exactly that. All right, end of essay. There were other explorers. Ponce de Leon was looking for the Fountain of Youth. He sailed for Spain. He explored Florida. Didn't find the Fountain of Youth. Balboa discovered the Pacific Ocean. Some French explorers explored the northern part of the Western Hemisphere. Cartier, La Salle, Cabot, men like that. There were plenty of explorers. And the Spanish ones, at least, were called conquistadors, which means conquerors, which is not a good sign, is it, when you talk about the Native Americans? Now we have to talk about this. In the news, Christopher Columbus statues are being toppled and defaced across America as we speak. Why? What's going on? What do we have to understand that maybe we didn't understand as well as we should in the past? And here's what it is. Yes, did Columbus discover America? Was he the first European to reach the New World? Yes. Yes, he was. But, and there's a huge but here, he will begin the period in history in which the Europeans will come and colonize, that means occupy and make their own, the Western Hemisphere. And the Europeans will bring with them diseases. Diseases that will, in the next 100 years, decimate the Native American population. Estimates of the population of the Western Hemisphere at the time of Columbus's arrival in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. You heard that in third grade. Today, estimates range basically from 50 million to 100 million. All right. Germs in the next 100 years will kill 90% of the Native American population and begin a period in which the Europeans will enslave and exploit and destroy the Native Americans. That's a part of history too. Again, history's not black and white, it's gray. So what about Columbus Day? What about the Columbus statues? Well, Columbus did do something momentous in history. First European discovered the New World. And he did start, the age of exploration, it's called. But he began a period in which the Native Americans will be decimated. So there's two things here. Christopher Columbus was Italian. He was sailing for Spain because Spain paid for his voyage, but he was Italian. And it seems to me Columbus Day is a great day to celebrate Italian heritage. But it should never be one-sided ever again. There are two sides to Columbus and Columbus Day and a Columbus statue, and we need to do our history better and understand that and acknowledge that. That's what's going on in the news as we speak, as Columbus statues come down. And we'll talk about other people whose statues are coming down as we go through this semester. All right. Now, just a couple of hints. You're going to be watching a video for your second essay for the first exam. And I want you to just hint, watch the whole video. I think most of the answers are in the first half, but watch the entire video. It's good stuff and gives context for what we're going to be covering the whole semester. Also, think about this. Just think about these things. Where did the Spanish settle? Where did the Portuguese settle? Where did the French settle? Where did the Dutch? And you know the Dutch, they live in Holland, otherwise known as the Netherlands. Where did they settle? Where did the English, who got the late start, where did they settle in the New World? All right, that's what you're going to be dealing with in your second essay. And the first English settlements, when they finally got them going in the early 1600s, some of those settlers were looking for one thing, and some of those settlers were looking for another thing. Yes, there's this, getting rich. But then there's also this, religion. Hint, hint, hint. All right, but this is about your first essay. These checks right here, it doesn't have to be that long. These checks will answer the question. And let's have a great semester. Get your assignments in on time. And I will see you next time. All right.